Alright guys, now that you've done all your research and you have some notes to help you, you are ready to start concept designing. A concept drawing is a simplified sketch illustrating the main aspects of a project. The key word here is simplified. They don't need to be pretty, or exact, or even to scale. The main thing is to get your ideas on paper. Today, I'm going to walk you through how I work through a concept design layout and hopefully give you a few new ways to think about your own barn design in this stage. Number 1, review your pre-design notes. The first step is to review your pre-design notes. For this one, we are going to come up with a barn that has 2 12 by 12 stalls, 1 wash bay, 1 feed room, and 1 tack room. If you have a specific area you need to work within, this is also something you'll want to write and keep in mind in this stage. Now I'm going to be using SketchUp for this, but you can definitely do this with pen and paper. I'm not going through how to make these shapes or lines today, but if you want a brief tutorial, watch my SketchUp Basics video. So I start by creating rooms or stalls and place them where I think I might like to have them. In this case, I started with the stalls side by side, then placed a cross tie, but realized there was a problem. I'm not going to be able to access that corner room if I place it here. The solution? Give myself 4 feet in front of it so I can now have access to that room from outside of the cross tie. That out of the way, I continue to place the other room. I haven't decided yet on which will be the tack room and which will be the feed room. I tend to get a better idea later on which makes more sense. However, I did decide I don't want a shed row, but an enclosed barn. So I make note of that by drawing a line where I want the outer edge to be. Right here, I'm just drawing an X so I can remind myself that I need a drain there. Next thing I do is try to think about access. I ask myself questions like, where might doors go? Where can I put doors and windows to get better ventilation? If I want my horse to have access to paddocks, where do those doors go? So ask yourself questions. Draw different answers to those questions. See what works and what doesn't. Adjust and move rooms or stalls as you need to. Nothing you do in this stage is set in stone. Next, think about the pastures and paddocks. Draw different paddock layouts that work with your plan. Then decide what works best. The reason I do this is so I can again look at the doors and windows. You saw in the first paddock layout, the only option was to have the Dutch doors at the back of the stall, whereas the second one gave me the option to put a Dutch door on the right side. Let's go with the first one for now. Also, think about what elements you might want out there. In this case, maybe one of those swanky drinking posts. And although I want both horses to have access to water, maybe I don't have the money for 2. So maybe I think about a way to put one in the center that they can both access from their space. Maybe you actually want a further grass pasture for them to play around in, and there's separate paddocks to be dry lots. Again, this is where your pre-designed notes help keep you on track. The main reason you draw these out is so you have an idea of any water or utility lines you might need to run from the barn. Next, let's think about gates and openings. A couple of things to think about. If you have a barrier, either a wall or a fence, I suggest moving your gate out at least a panel rather than right at the corner. The main reason is it gives you room. If you've ever dealt with hot, young, or spooky horses, You want to make sure that you have the ability to get out of the way without being trapped. It will also make moving equipment in and out easier. Speaking of equipment, your tractor for instance, let's start thinking about things like how it moves throughout the paddocks. Tractors are fairly large, and making sharp turns like this are difficult, so plan for that. Give yourself the room. Maybe you need 2 or 3 panels before that gate. You don't need to know the specifics at this point, but you want to draw it out so you can make sure it doesn't interfere with your barn, any other obstacles, or other gates. Ooh, and I thought of one other thing. Is it possible for them to have access to one water for all 3 spaces? Lastly, think about where you might put your manure pile. Look at a couple different spots. How does each location affect your design? You can see when I put it on the left side, I think about possibly adding a door to this outside. And if I kept it here, it would likely mean that this corner room would become the feed room. I'd much rather bring it through there than the tack room, but I think there's a better option. What if you move the manure pile? And what if you have access through the cross tie? Then you're not bringing it through the feed or the tack room, and it's a straighter access to the pile anyway. So we'll leave it here for now. And that about wraps it up for today. As mentioned in the beginning, concept drawings are not set in stone, and I have found that if you take some time away from it, maybe a day, a week, you will likely think of even better ways to lay things out. Concept drawing is all about being explorative, so go explore.